Rhianna Dhillon is going to be in conversation with filmmaker, film historian, documenter, and community cinema organizer himself. Please welcome the fantastic Mark Cousins.
I'll go the other side, yeah. Thank you. Hi, you need a microphone. God, we definitely need to hear you tonight.
Thank you.
The wonderful Mark Cousins. This is such a thrill for me. I'm so excited.
I'm so pleased as well. Thank you. Just looking at Sing in the Rain, I remember Tilda Swinton and I put Singing in the Rain on in one of our little cinemas, and there we are there. And I was lucky enough to know Stanley Donen, who directed it. But anyway, we put the film on here, and it was screen, and we hid behind the screen with, you know, those scooters that you use to water your plants?
Yeah.
You know, those. And then when the famous da-dee-da-da, we came out and scooshed the audience. And at the end, a woman came up and complained to us, a person of us, and she said, I would like to complain. We charged £3, and she said, I did not get scooshed.
Do you agree with Cinema Paradiso being number one?
No.
What is your number one?
There would be about 5 million films before that, in my opinion. The film that I've seen most in the world is probably Billy Wilder's film, The Apartment.
Yes.
You know, which is, I think it's bittersweet. It's about love and the death of love. And I saw it before I was ever in love. And it says that it'll be tricky. And so it is, but it's wonderful.
That's a very, very good choice. What is your earliest memory of community cinema?
Really none. Okay. You know, I was brought up in Northern Ireland and we had the Troubles, you know, and so it wasn't easy to go to the cinema. And I lived in a new town called Antrim and there was no cinema. So I had none for a long time. But then I started to realize that, you know, cinema wasn't this thing that had to be done to us. It could be done by us, you know. And so I think started to realize I ran things like I ran the Edinburgh Film Festival, which was great, but it was so corporate and you all had to think about the sponsors and what they wanted. And so when I left that, I thought, let's completely... Are we allowed to swear here? Yeah.
I mean, we're all adults.
Let's fuck with the form.
Yes.
What is the form? How do we show films? How can we fuck with that? You know. And so that's when I started doing more community-based things. And I love the feeling that we don't have to be corporate. The market fails. It doesn't deliver to us what we want as a particular city or village or community of people, you know. So how does the market fail, and how can we be inventive in delivering what the market doesn't deliver?
Yeah. So the pressure was on then for your first actual community cinema. What were you going to screen? How did you land on that?
Well, it was with Tilda Swinton. It was before this, and it was up in Nairn in Scotland. Yeah. And Tilda messaged me and said, I've found a little place which was called the Ballerina Ballroom. And she said, can I take you along? And it was a bit smelly and manky, and the carpets were sort of stick. But it was like, let's try and do something. And we tried to, in a very childlike way, do something in this town. We were very influenced by children's parties, by mosh pits.
Those two so naturally go together.
By kind of religious experience, by even a bit of gallery art, you know.
Okay.
What if you mix all that up, you know? And so our funding was, our pricing was really important. It's £3 for adults, £2 for children. We kept asking ourselves, you know, what's affordable if a grandparent wants to bring their grandchild? £5 for the two. But we also said you get in free if you bake cakes or anything like that. And there's a photograph, I don't know if it's going to come up here, but there's a photograph of a big long line of people standing outside the cinema, and people thought that was people waiting to get in to see a movie. but it wasn't. It was something far more special. We said, like, I remember getting phone calls saying, could we speak to your press department? And we saying, we have no press departments because we have no departments of any description. And the big long line of people outside the cinema was people coming to help clean the toilets, prepare for the next screening, prop up the beanbags, and
just without being asked.
We just said, look, if anybody wants to help, and it was. I just remember people hoovering. I remember hoovering to a Tina Turner song, and there was a lot of sort of. There's a Queen video. Do you remember?
It sounds very Queen. Sounds very Freddie Mercury.
Do you remember that one? It wasn't quite that, but it was sort of, so people arrived early, and we tried to do fun things. I was lucky enough to get some tea from Sergei Parajanov, some of the greats who made Color of Pomegranates, and this great filmmaker. And so we showed up one of his films, and we gave people tea beforehand, and we didn't tell them that. Only afterwards I said that tea that you had came from the filmmaker. And I'll never forget that, again, this was in the north of Scotland, and somebody said Kenneth Anger, who again, the cinephiles will all know who that is. Kenneth Anger is in town. Like, what? And he would like to introduce the film. So he stood up and started talking about this film directed by Parajanov. And I was here until Tilda Swinton was over there. And then Kenneth Anger started talking about Nazi boys' legs. And I looked at Tilda and I think, okay, we have to get him off here. And it was like shuffle, 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 shuffle. Kenneth, it's very nice. Thank you very much. But it was the funkiness of it, and it was really anti-corporate, which is what you guys all do. Obviously, if somebody wants to give you a bit of money, that's fine, but it was kind of against all the red carpety stuff.
Yeah, it strikes me there's so much romance in community cinema, just in terms of, like you say, the setting is so important, the atmosphere, the experience. So what other things have you done to really, bring the experience alive for your members?
Well, I think this one here,
tell us about what the hell is going on.
This was called The Pilgrimage. So this was the second thing that, or maybe the third thing that we did, and I had been brought up Catholic, and Catholic, and here it is as well. And in Catholicism, we had to show how much we loved God by putting your back into it, and we had to walk naked with our bare feet up hills in Ireland and all that sort of stuff. Right. And I remember saying to Tilda, look, why don't we steal from the religious ritual, those ideas, to try and do something that show how much we love cinema. Yeah. So this is those of you, I know there's Scots in the audience, we all know about this fantastic mobile cinema, the screen machine. And I said to Tilda, why don't we get a tow rope, which you can see there, and pull the cinema across Scotland, not the whole of Scotland, but bits of it. So you can see the total, and the number of people who said, well, you must have turned the engine on a little bit, because the truck is 36 tons.
Oh my goodness.
But as you can see, it was pissing with rain, and it was... We pulled it, we worked out in advance, we drove the route, and anything that was slightly uphill, we said, no fucking way. So it had to be, or even slightly downhill would be even better. But, these people, again, there was no structure to this. We didn't have an admin system or anything like that, but people just came from around the world, and we pulled the cinema into villages. That old idea of the circus coming to town, And some of these villages maybe had cinemas in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but they were long gone. So we just thought, why don't we have fun and do that? And children loved it, of course, because it was a lot of fun.
What films that you've put on do you think have got the most surprising reactions from the members that come?
We showed in this particular thing, we showed lots of films about travel. You know, Sullivan's Travels. You know, road movies. I think we showed Kings of the Road, of Inventors. But the one that seemed to move people most was a film from Iran. I love Iranian cinema, as I'm sure many of you do, and I worked there a bit. And it was a film called Bag of Rice, and it was about a little girl who's helping an old lady carry rice across the city of Tehran, and she's on a bus, and they're on the bus, and it's all going well, and then the bag gets kind of cut, and the rice starts to fall out, and it's so wonderful. And we showed it multiple times, and the word of mouth spread, and that was the strongest reaction.
Yeah. So, kind of talking about almost moving location through this, but how important is location to community cinema, do you think? Does it matter? Does it have to be like those beautiful buildings, or do you think it makes a difference to the people in there watching the film?
I think beautiful buildings can be off-putting in some ways. If you go back to, we were talking about the 1920s, you know, and those movie palaces, Jack, wherever you are, you're talking about the movie palaces, you know, and the 2000, and people felt glamorous, but there can be those places beautiful buildings can be intimidating, you know, and especially it depends on your social class background. If you know, if you come from a working class background, which some of us do, and I certainly do, it can be intimidating to go into an arts center, you know, because there's a way of behaving that you perhaps don't understand. You don't speak that language, you know, and if they're selling a certain type of drink or food that you're not used to, you can feel this is not for you in a way, you know. So I think that unthreatening places are really, really good, you know. And Tilda, you know, you said ramshackle rocks, and so we were rough and ready, and we made mistakes, and it was very much, please come in because we don't know what we're doing. So I think the big fancy buildings aren't great.
Yes.
You know, something that's really, you know, just got a place in the community is better.
How democratic are the decisions when it comes to which films to screen? How do you and Tilda decide? Do you ever disagree?
Do we ever disagree? No, we haven't actually. Good. We're just sort of. We set up something called the 8.5 Foundation, which was a fun thing to do, which was, we decided that, you know, we thought, because we both fell in love with cinema when we were 8.5, like sort of before, this is us doing a Laurel and Hardy flash mob. So, you know, I could probably still do it now. You know, I shouldn't. But, so we learned to do a flash mob. And then she's not here, but there was a woman behind us. And you can just see her mouth there. And those of you who know Edinburgh in Scotland, there's a place called Morningside, which is quite posh. And we were literally doing this Laurel and Hardy dance. And the local newspaper came up to her, and she was beautifully dressed with a lovely scarf. And they said to her, "Is this the sort of thing that you usually do?" And she said to the journalist, "Do I look as if this is the sort of thing I usually do?" So to Tilda, we don't.
The 8.5.
So we 8.5. We fell in love at the same time. We seem to have a similar taste in cinema, you know.
What did you fall in love? Which was the film that you fell in love with?
Herbie Rides Again. That was that was in the cinema. But then on TV, the BBC and TV was my, like, especially if you're growing up in a difficult part of the world. So it was Orson Welles' Touch of Evil, Hitchcock series. There was a Hitchcock series. There was the BBC owned, and I think still does own, the RKO archive, and so they were showing all those Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movies, and so it was that kind of stuff.
And so is that an era that you hark back to often when you're putting on screenings? It
was my launching pad. It was my escape velocity. Yeah. And so when you see those films, when you see Rita Hayworth, and when you see a film like It Should Happen to You with Jack Lemmon in it, you sort of think, okay, this is I get this now. I know this is me, you know, whatever that is. It's 10,000 miles away from me, but it's also me. I speak this language. There are other languages I don't speak, like sport, for example, or other things, but I speak this one. And once you realize you speak the language of cinema, then it's like a drug dealer. You're hooked on the drug, and so then you're off. Yeah. Then you're off and you're rocketing, you know. And then cinema takes you by the hand for your whole life, you know, through the mountaintop and the valley of tears and everything in between. It just takes you by the hand and never leaves you. Yeah.
Sorry, you were telling us about how you and Tilda land on the films that you choose to screen.
Yeah, basically I send her a list and she sends me a list and it's the same list.
What, always?
Yeah.
Do you have themes? You said you had like sort of travel themes.
We haven't done a project together in nearly 3 years, you know. So it's we did one little thing. So it's just we come together just to have fun. Yeah. Like it has to be not work for us, you know, because she's one of the busiest persons on the planet, and I'm not far behind, you know. So it's just like let's just learn a Laurel and Hardy dance for no reason whatsoever.
There was one. Was it? I read where she asked everyone to just come in their pajamas, and
we did. We wanted to do Margaret Rutherford films, which I think is crucial, you know, and so we just did pajamas, and there were really quite a lot of pajamas, you know, and then people sort of kept coming back at sort of, you know, late at night in their pajamas as well. Pajamas went down very well. But I went to see a Studio Ghibli film recently, and parents were there with their kids, both in pajamas, you know, so bring it on.
Yeah, big fan. Is there a particular genre that you think does well or better in community cinema, or does it not really matter?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, looking back at my experience, it's the films about connection that seem to do well, you know, because you watch film at home in a different, and I love going to the cinema on my own, I have to say, you know, and those films that are about solitude and loneliness are really good when you're on your own, but in community environments, I think the films about connection, coming together, that's why I'm not surprised that It's a Wonderful Life is high up on this list, you know, but this Iranian film that I mentioned earlier is absolutely about how do we get this woman with her bag of rice and this girl, how do we get her home together? Right. You know, like together, you know. So I think that idea of connection seems to go well in showing films in this way.
How do you encourage the conversation afterwards? Because as we've kind of all talked about, the film is such a small part, actually, of community cinema. So much of it is the discussions around it. So how do you like to make sure that...
Yeah, well, we... Can I be honest?
Please.
We don't do discussions in the... So what we do... again, just to say that we only do these things occasionally, but when we do, we don't tell the audience, but when the film's on, we cook food. So you just get a big pot and you do beans and rice and, you know, and then people come out and they get free food. Yeah. And then once they're outside the cinema, because it was the mobile cinema most times, then discussions happen. Yeah. And the ballerina ballroom, the thing that I was talking about earlier, we did something different. So because you're working with a great famous actor, filmmaker like Tilda, then we had guest programmers like Joel Cohen, for example. And Joel Cohen chose a brilliant Busby Berkeley film. And because we were digitally projecting, the film was so great. So I remember standing up and said, you know that brilliant dance scene, would anybody like to see it again? And they said, yeah. So we showed that again and again.
Oh, I thought you meant you were going to do it.
No, we just showed it again. And I'll remember Stanley, when we showed Singing in the Rain, when Stanley Donen, Stanley Donen said he would come and then he didn't. And sitting in the front row was a great dancer called, I think, Mark Morris is a dancer. And he stood up when the film finished and he said, again. And other people said again. So I said to the projections, could we just show it again? So we repeated the film 10 minutes later. And so you know, instead of talking about it, we just did things like that. And always we did dancing either before or afterwards. So, like, often I think that what we would do is, before a film started, we'd play a song really quite loud. You know, it could be a Patti Smith song, or it would be a Depeche Mode, or it could be a disco song, and we would we'd turn all the lights out and get a torch and just move it around the audience, and people would dance so much that when the film started, everybody was like, and then it was disinhibiting, you know, because, you know, we were trying to say very clearly, this is not a talkative experience, this is not an intellectual encounter, it's more physical, it's more fun, it's more childlike than that. So people, and then the film starts, and the reactions are really strong once you've all danced together. But we would also do it afterwards as well. Like, anybody want? Shall we just dance? You know, and you know, it could be a song from the movie or something else.
Yeah. I was just going to ask, perhaps not dancing, but perhaps. What do you think that more? I don't know, the kind of more theatrical releases, cinemas. What can they learn from community cinema? How can they sort of speak to their audience a little bit more, like Danny was talking about?
Like
get that
normal cinemas? Like,
I don't want to say normal, because it implies that you're abnormal, but normal cinemas.
I think that they need to be more inventive, you know. I've the greatest respect for the cinemas, you know, and like where I live in Edinburgh, we've got The View and we've got Filmhouse, we've got a lot of cinemas that are very good. There's just a feeling that it can feel a bit mechanistic in a way, you know. It's a bit, and again, particularly View is really good. They're showing loads of Bengali films, films from West India, South India. So I really think that's very, very good work. But, you know, shake it up a bit, you know, add a wee bit of spice into it, you know. I think whether it's dancing or food or something like that, I just think you can make it a lot more fun, and always, for me at least, remember that going to cinema is quite a childlike experience in some way. I sit in the front row, hopefully agog. Then, of course, I turn on my brain afterwards and think, what just happened? You know, what were those emotions? And how do I understand that, you know? But the kind of rapturous, passionate, open encounter with this bigger than life thing, sitting in winter looking at summer, you know, anything that enhances the open-hearted aspect of cinema going, I think, is fantastic.
Yeah. I know we're kind of probably bored to death of talking about it, but I kind of want to ask how you think COVID changed the state of community cinema.
COVID made us hungry for imagery, you know. I think I was really hungry, and of course we all sat at home and, you know, ate pizza, and, you know, if we were lucky enough to have a loved one, and, you know, and streamed a lot more. But certainly I was really hungry for seeing again, and for something bigger than life. COVID, you know, which was awful in many ways, but it was smaller than life. It reduced our life to our own houses and apartments and living rooms, you know, so I couldn't wait to get back to the epic mode of looking.
Do you remember, like, the first film that you saw post-COVID?
Yes, I do. It was Tenet.
As it was for probably so many of us.
Yeah. I couldn't wait. I could not believe that it wasn't full. I mean, I was like, so we can go back to the cinema again? Of course, I was there the first day, you know, and I thought I liked the film, but, you know, the fact that it was back there.
How have your experiences with community cinema sort of furthered your understanding of what audiences want, and therefore impacted your own filmmaking?
I think audiences want all sorts of things, you know. I think that I strongly believe that a lot of film lovers are actually quite shy, you know, introverted in some ways, you know. And I was talking to Danny about this earlier, and that feeling that you can be more yourself in the dark than you can be in life because of all the social pressures. I'm certainly quite introverted in some ways, you know, and so I think that it's hard to generalize what audiences want, you know, but I think that there's difference, you know, like if you're in a big city or if you're in a smaller place. I think that I want to get out of myself. You know, I want what Joseph Campbell called the rapture of self-loss. And you can either get out of yourself into solitude, or you can get out of yourself into a community and meet friends, new people for the first time. So any of that works, but it's hard to generalize, I think.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of, I don't know, audiences being told what they're into by sort of more mainstream cinemas is... That's where community cinema really kind of steps in.
Yeah, I really think so. I mean, I think that the people, again, I do respect some of the new programming ideas. They are strong, and they're actually asking, so we've got loads of Bengalis in our community, or Polish people, or Lithuanians, and what's working in their film cultures, and let's put that on. So there's a lot of good work. So we can't demonize the multiplexes. I think it's wrong to, but at the same time, we don't want to be done to. We really want to have a sense of what we need. What is the, that lovely word in French, terroir, the ground on which the grapes grow. What fertilizes us from the bottom up. How
does the US approach community cinema? You spent
really good.
Quite a bit of time there.
There's loads of stuff. I was lucky enough to be on the board of, Michael Moore, the great documentary filmmaker, right? Well, he has a cinema in Traverse City, Michigan. It's called, and it's, I can't remember what it's called, but it was opened in, let's say, 1938 or something. And so I was on the board of that, and I saw what happened there, and it was amazing. Traverse City, Michigan was damaged by years of underinvestment and right-wing politics, and it opened, and they did it beautifully. And not only, it's campus fuck, so as well as the curtains open, there's like the velvet curtains open this way, it opens this way, I mean, it's total boudoir.
Yeah.
And it did so well that the shop on the side and left and the right, and then it was turned into a restaurant and a cafe, and not suddenly, over a number of years, the whole street was rejuvenated because of the cinema.
Really?
And they do a very nice thing that I think it's every Tuesday, the ticket prices are what they were in 1936 or something.
Brilliant.
So it's like 5 cents or something like that. But to see, of course, the US is a specific problem because there's no government funding for anything like this, But to see this town really, really enhanced by this new jewel, this kind of, to use a metaphor, a kind of lighthouse shedding light in the town.
Do you think there's like an element of course correction in community cinema?
What's that again?
Like course correction, like where they're sort of encouraging forgotten gems, or trying to highlight filmmakers that, long forgotten filmmakers. Is that a huge part of it, or is that just what we like to project onto it?
I think, if you look at that canon, that top 10, there was one big surprise in there for me, but...
Which one was that?
Over what's it called? I've seen it. What's it called? Which I was very surprised by, and rather pleased by, So yes, I think that it depends what the community is, I mean, there's some community cinemas that just go for the classics, but if you've got a community which is, less mainstream in some ways, then my goodness, you're getting all sorts of things popped up. And I'm really impressed by what Letterboxd has been doing, what the canon has emerged in the Letterboxd users, like really good, surprising films. And I was in HMV today, by the way. The HMV today in Sheffield is fantastic, isn't it? I mean, really, really one of the best I've been in. And look what they've got a section on Letterboxd as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and which is new and good. So I think that if you can't force taste on people, and that's great. And for too long, for the most of movie history, we as consumers of cinema were done to by distributors and other people trying to guess what we would like. And again, not to be cynical, a lot of them really did great work. Yeah. But sometimes the canon became calcified. Here are the best films, etc. And we obviously need to always challenge that.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest hurdles that you found, or do you think just from word of mouth, that people who run community cinemas face?
Everything, as you know. I mean, it's, rental, space rental and property rental is really difficult, as you know. Yeah. And just all the, the stuff that you need to do to get things on screen, you know. I mean, I think that Cinema for All is so good that it's really addressing as many of the problems as possible, you know. But things like, you know, leaky roofs, you know. I mean, it's a nightmare.
Literally got, I think, here.
It's a nightmare, all that sort of stuff. So the more help we can have with that kind of thing, the better, you know. And we can look to other places, you know. France is really good, and, you know, and I'm lucky enough to travel a lot, and so if I go to Egypt or Iran, the black market, you know, is incredible that people are showing, or China, you know, people are showing behind coffee shops, they're showing films in China, you know, but here we're very lucky because we've got Cinema for All, you know, but still leaky roofs and things.
What motivates you then to keep going, or what do you think motivates?
The love of cinema.
Yeah.
I mean, cinema is, you know, as I mentioned earlier, it's a friend for life, and particularly if you're a slightly shy person, it becomes it becomes your rocket fuel in a way. It gives you confidence to go out in the world. Cinema has connected me with so many people that I wouldn't otherwise do so. So that's what keeps me going.
And finally, it's the most important question. Obviously, popcorn is synonymous with cinema going. But in your experience, what are the snacks that are most well received in a community cinema?
Sorry, say that again?
What are the snacks that are the most well received?
So in Edinburgh, there are two fantastic women of a certain age, late 70s, and every time I go to a horror movie, they're there. And I love them dearly, and they eat 3 packets of crisps each. And let's just say it's not the most quiet
Do they wait for the jump scare?
So if, you know, I wave to them every day, and if they're over there, I'm over here. I'm not a big snacker.
I mean, you're missing out. It's always the cake. It's always,
No.
Let's be honest, it's always the cake. Mark Cousins, thank you so much for joining us and for talking about community cinema. We appreciate you so much. Thank you.